Welcome. Welcome to the Longtable. This is the last iteration of the Longtable organized by the How to Do Things with Performance research group. Tero, Nauha, Hanna Järvinen, Pilvi, Porkola, and myself, Annette Arlander. And we are in the Hietsu Pavilion and hoping for some live participants to enter the room as well. But so far, greetings to you who look at this streaming now or later. I have a short introduction to our previous iterations of the Longtable, but I should explain the rules to begin with. The ordinary Longtable instigated by Louise is based on the idea that there is a table and anybody who sits at the table is allowed to speak about anything they want to speak. The people sitting around the table will listen. But we have modified this in the manner that we have prepared 4 small introductory talks and programs, and after that we continue with the conversation. So you have time to hurry up here to Hietsu if you are somewhere in Helsinki nearby. But anyway, this variation of the Longtable is here to provide us a place to engage in conversations and to remind us of our previous experiments with the format. For SAR, Society for Artistic Research, at the ZHDK in Zurich in 2018, we created the first iteration of the Longtable, riffing off one of the themes of the conference. Our proposal was called Longtable on Productive Gaps by How to Do Things with Performance Research Project. We proposed to undertake a performative version of the classic feminist Longtable instigated by Louise, as I mentioned, here developed to include 4 performative contributions by the members of the research group. The topic we proposed to begin with was first, how to do things with performance. Second, what are the gaps in our understanding what performance is or could be? And third, what are the gaps in our views and experiences related to what doing things entails? Starting from there, we hoped the discussion could evolve to take up the participants' experiences of productive gaps and other related concerns in the room, and to develop in an open manner, which traditionally has been the main purpose of the format, and its political use. Well, this first experience was not altogether successful, and with mixed feelings we decided to try another time at the PSI Performance Studies International Conference 25 in Calgary, in Canada in 2019, with the theme Elasticity. And there the title of our proposal was Elastic Connections, a Longtable by How to Do Things with Performance Research Project. There we suggested that the 4-year artistic research project funded by the Academy of Finland has experimented with doing things with performance from distinct methodological starting points, bringing together 4 researchers' practices in different productive collisions and experimental settings, as you will see later today. And that Longtable continued the development of collaborative practice that does not seek a technical, methodological, or theoretical consensus. So we are allowed to disagree. Our shared concerns were, nevertheless, first, again, how do we do things with performance? Secondly, how elastic should our understanding of performance be? And thirdly, what doing things entails in the context of PSI? Can elasticity, or in conference settings in general, can elasticity function as an academic and/or artistic strategy or tool? In short, how to resist neoliberal demand for endless elasticity in art and academia. And in this second iteration, 2 of our 4-person group participated through remote presence, while the 2 physically present participants took the role of caring for the participants in the room gathered around a version of Longtable. And the remote representatives are also present here today, as you can see the dolls on the table. And maybe this is all I need to say as an introduction. Let's start from here.
Something happened on the way to Canada. I should have known. Something always happens on the way to Canada. I don't mind.
People now tend to hug me a lot, especially little people. It's odd. A unicorn, as you know, is a rare magical being of incomparable beauty. Well, cuteness. Superb cuteness. That's me, yes. Beauty that will kill you. Every story of unicorns is about death and killing. The unicorn does the killing, unless you are pure and innocent in the sexual sense, which explains the little people. They are dangerous to unicorns, innocent people. They turn us into pools of cuddles and sweetness and light. In the stories, the hunters of unicorns always cheat by luring us with a virgin who seduces and tames the unicorn. Are there any virgins in the room? Who am I kidding? It's an arts conference, I'm perfectly safe. Anyway, as rare and utterly lethal epitome of beauty turned puddle of cuteness in late capitalism, I am an apt symbol for intersectional feminism. You expected me to say patriarchy, didn't you? It's the horn. I'm a lady with the golden horn. Pierce you with my golden horn of queerness, I will. The cuteness is a survival strategy in late capitalism. I don't get hunted down. I now get hugged and carried to places. Places like Canada. Sometimes they're not the places I intended to go, but if not, well, life's an adventure. So, I'm metaphorically elastic, but today, truth be told, I'm feeling a little stiff. And I'm not talking about my horn, my golden horn. My materiality has reduced elasticity, and this means reduced mobility. I cannot move, gesture, self-propel myself across this space. It's awkward. I can only be codependent, hence not very able. Thank you. I am Hanna. I'm not here and not speaking in my tongue. I am ventriloquizing, speaking from the belly, both literally and figuratively. Ventriloqui, belly speak. Speaking magically from the belly of the magical unicorn. The Greeks called this gastromancy, stomach magic. The noises thus produced by oracles were thought to be the voices of the unliving who had taken up residence in the stomach of the ventriloquist. This was before microphones. And the ventriloquist could speak to the dead and foretell the future. So there, unicorn magic. To speak to the dead is dangerous, however. To foretell the future, even more so. We are all going to die. The die is cast. Aleatory magic is another very old way of predicting the future. As Hanna, I'm in the past, but I can see the future as the unicorn. I can tell that several of you are wearing something black. I can tell that some of you are wearing clothes made of cotton made on another continent. Cold reading, mentalism, as stage magicians call it, depends on probabilities and understanding theories of mind in a way that is a little sociopathic. I know because I live with a magician. How do you think I became a unicorn? I speak from the stomach, the belly of the beast that is the unicorn, at a time that is not now. The agency of this unicorn is precarious, dependent on the goodwill of those present as more than voice. Like the artist or the academic, whose labour is precarious, dependent on work opportunities and funding structures largely beyond their own control, I can only try to project a presence, a voice in a broken feedback loop where I cannot hear you, but I depend on you hearing me, and that's sociopathic in a nutshell. So how to be a unicorn? How to be a being of cuteness and light? I need to pause for a bit to think about this.
Okay, if I continue. Well, I was thinking that is there something in my research that I have dismissed in a way or another during these years? So asking myself, is there something perhaps not so obvious that needs a bit more attention now when the project ends? The main topic in my research was performance and institution, and there will be an article about that in our forthcoming book. So perhaps I skip that now and bring forth some other things which are connected for sure. And the first thing that came to my mind was this book that was done 2017. I was editing it in a rush at the same time when I was starting to work as a professor of artistic research for 1 year. And I'm not entirely happy of my editing here, and that's the reason why I haven't talked about the book so much during the years. However, I think it deserves a bit more attention. So the book is Performance Artist's Workbook on Teaching and Learning Performance Art Essays and Exercises. And the idea of the book I like very much is to think about teaching of performance art. And I still think it's important topic and it's not discussed enough. And also I like the structure of the book. There are 5 essays written by teachers, so 4 of us plus Ray Langenbach. And then there are 44 performance art exercises from different artists and teachers all around the world. And I like the variety of the book and this idea that there is no any gatekeeper to say if we agree about definition of performance art or not. And also, which is very nice in this book is that it's academic and non-academic at the same time. And the main idea is to encourage people to do some performance art in easy manner. The book is also available online for free, and I was told that after 1 week of publishing, it was the most loaded theatre academy publication ever. So there was a kind of need or interest to this kind of book. So the book is, the aim is to be practical. So I like to suggest that we do one exercise now. It's by Joshua Schofer, and it is give yourself a round of applause. So
it's the right moment to do it.
Let's do it. Okay, another thing, another book. During the research years, I have been teaching a lot, and the weird thing is that I'm not really teaching what I'm researching, and it seems that research for teaching is one thing, and research for research is another thing. Of course, they are combined, but it's something that puzzles me a bit. And during this research, I did also some art university pedagogy studies, and that was a great opportunity to think and reflect about teaching. And after those studies, Heli Kauppila and Kai Lehikoinen edited this book, puheenvuoroja oman työn kehittämisestä taidealojen yliopistopedagogisessa koulutuksessa toiminnasta sanoiksi. Toisinpäin. Toiminnasta sanoiksi. So anyway, it's about art university pedagogy.
From action to words.
Yeah. And the book is in Finnish, so I thought that perhaps I can say a few words about the text I wrote. It's about time and space, new materialistic and performance approaches to the pedagogy. And so I was contemplating how to deal with the concept of performance in pedagogy. So what does it mean to explore pedagogical situations from the perspective of performance studies? Another approach I had here was new materialism, meaning I was curious to focus on materialistic circumstances in pedagogy, as well as to think how they affect the teaching situation in general. In new materialist feminist pedagogy, the starting point is the idea of questioning the hierarchies that prevail in the teaching situation. Teaching is understood as collaboration and learning together, which is also influenced by non-human and material agents. Different ways of knowing and doing create a teaching situation where knowledge is not something that is conveyed, but something that is created together. Likewise, a new materialist pedagogy emphasizes a critical attitude to the prevailing academic ways of knowledge production. In teaching, the focus is not on producing results, but on understanding its potentialities. And for me, as a performance artist, the important components of performance are embodiment, space, duration, and materiality. And here I try to think about what these mean in terms of pedagogy. And I speak about, I write about two cases. One was workshop for university teachers in Turku I gave some years ago, and another case was performance studies course for dancers a few years ago in Theatre Academy. And with these two examples, I sum up some thoughts of performance pedagogy. And then the third thing I thought that I like to come up with today is the library essays. Elephants are always drawn smaller than life size, which was the performance I started this whole project. And this is not the dismissed part of my works at all, but I thought that it's nice to somehow end where you started. And so let's listen a few minutes of this library essay, which originally was a part of an installation done in empty Maunula library. But here we can hear a text, let's say 5 minutes in the middle of it, written by me, translated and read in English by Hanna Järvinen. And yes, it's middle of, but I guess I hope it works.
Collaborate because they believed in shared myths. Such myths were, for example, religion, borders between nations, equality, and money. The imaginary does not denote the false or an untruth. Quote, all natural order is a stable order. There is no chance that gravity will cease to function tomorrow, even if people stop believing in it. In contrast, imagined order is always in danger of collapse, because it depends upon myths, and myths vanish once people stop believing them. In order to safeguard an imagined order, continuous and strenuous efforts are imperative. End of quote. According to Harari, then, the ability to imagine things is central to the human experience, and a large portion of the so-called human part of life, as well as all important communication, is based on imagination. I listened to Arja Saijonmaa's Thanks to Life, I found out that Arja Saijonmaa recorded the song in Finnish only in 1979. So there's no chance that my father would have listened to it 7 years earlier, when I was born, in 1972. I wonder what record he was listening to. What record did he dance to?
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio dos luceros que cuando los abro, perfecto distinto.
A couple of years ago, when my father was already an old man, recovering from heart surgery and not at all recovered from the death of his second wife, I went to help him move house. He was moving to another city, relocating from his 3-bedroom apartment, full of books, to a small studio, and he needed to get rid of many of his things. I rang the doorbell. He answered the door. He was wearing nothing but a pair of boxer shorts, and sweat was running down his body. His eyes looked glazed as he stated, "You have to help me." I went to the living room, which was in chaos. The floor was covered in books with their covers torn off. My father continued his tearing, and I stared at him in shock, without understanding at all what he was doing. Most of the books have to be discarded, and the covers have to be torn off. Otherwise they can't go into paper recycling, my father explained. I never thought that day would come. A personal dystopia, an end of a world, me and my father among piles of books tearing their covers off. Georges Perec writes about moving house in his book, Species of Spaces and Other Pieces. Quote, moving out, leaving an apartment, vacating the scene, decamping, clearing up, clearing out, making an inventory, tidying up, sorting out, going through, eliminating, throwing away, palming off on, breaking, burning, taking down, unfastening, unnailing, unsticking, unscrewing, unhooking, unplugging, detaching, cutting, pulling, dismantling, folding up, cutting off, rolling up, wrapping up, packing away, strapping up, tying, piling up, assembling, heaping up, fastening, wrapping, protecting, covering, surrounding, locking, removing, carrying, lifting, sweeping, closing, leaving. End of quote.
Okay, thank you. instead of talking about what I've always talked about, my revisit and recreate returnings to the works I did on Harakka Island, which are presented here in the corner and still visible tomorrow if you want to see. There's 5 hours of those video essays. I'm going to say a few words about the other work which is here on display, which is called On the Edge, 1 to 3, and that's 3 still images with a pine tree. But wait a minute, I'll show you a PowerPoint. So this is a brief text, but I somehow tried to bridge the 2 projects I've been engaging with. This one, the how to do things with performance, and then another work that I've been doing for my living, so to speak, but which I continue now, which was called Performing with Plants, and now is Meetings with Remarkable and Unremarkable Trees. So, how to do things with performance when considering and engaging with others, including other than humans. I have been interested in performing with plants, especially trees, but the following sketch could apply to other animals, fungi, perhaps even microbes and bacteria, or various forms of robots or artificial intelligences, although their other issues would probably come to the fore and had to be added as well. But this model that I'm going to present it's not a joke, but it's a heavy simplification, a development and an abstraction of a schema that I published in Nordic Theatre Studies number 32 in a text called Performing with Plants in the Obscene Anthropocene, which deals with other matters, but this is there as based on different ways of performing with plants. But here I would like to create a link to how to do things with performance. So if we understand performance in the conventional way in music and dance of somebody performing for somebody else, we can distinguish humans performing for others, or others performing for humans. Humans performing, for instance, for plants, as they do in the group Dance for Plants, or as they did in the opera in Barcelona when the orchestra was playing for the potted plants in the auditorium, or others perform for humans as plants do when they are on display in shopping malls and so on. You can imagine or elephants perform in circuses and so on. You can imagine various alternatives. Right, but if we understand performance in the conventional way in theatre, of somebody performing as somebody else, this is not an alternative for, but in addition to, we can think of somebody performing as somebody else. We can distinguish humans performing as others, so humans performing as plants, as Louise Fuller, because Hanna is an expert on this, has been doing when dancing her floral dances, or others performing as humans, as we can think of a robot, or performing as an android, passing for a human. And many other examples. The third alternative, which I've sort of imagined that I've been engaged with, is performing with. So besides performing for and performing as, we can also think of performing with, which gives us, so somebody performing with somebody, which gives us humans performing with others, or others performing with humans. And my knowledge of English is not sufficient to understand the subtle difference between the two, but I guess it could be related to prioritizing the first term. So humans performing with somebody or others performing with somebody, there would be a hierarchy. And this can be done either loosely linked or in active collaboration or completely entangled, like Eduardo Koch's Edunia, which is actually a petunia plant which has genetic material from himself. So it's a bioartwork where it's a plantimal, so plant animal. So these basic types of relationships, performing for, performing as, and performing with, can be further differentiated in spatial and temporal terms, of course. So where does this performance take place? In human spaces of performance, like in the example I mentioned with the potted plants in the auditorium when the orchestra was playing, or when Spela Petrik was performing with the watercress and her shadow, she was standing immobile so that her shadow figure was formed on the plants because she was shadowing light, or in other spaces of performance when we go out into the forest to perform, or when I climb into a tree, for instance. And we can also think in terms of human time of performance. So do we expect the performance to take 2 hours in general, or can we imagine a 5-hour performance in exceptional cases? Or should we think in terms of 1 year or maybe 150 years, like a birch tree grows? Or I have not these. I don't have good examples of at the moment, but there could be found. So the other example is in other times of performance. So an aspect that is relevant in my own work, besides this time, spatial and temporal dimension, is of course, and trying to respect the other's time and space, which is very difficult, is the question of whether the performance takes place in the real or in representation. And I write in the real in quotation marks because I know that it's not a simple thing, for instance, from discussions with Tero, but there is a difference if I sit in a tree with my body and the tree's body, or if I just show the image of that performance. And in most cases of my work, both are involved, like with the images with the pine tree. So performing for camera together with the tree on site takes place in the real, but what you can see as the viewer here or in the exhibition is the representation. So one way of doing things with performance is to use performance as a method for producing images or other forms of representations like text. All right. In addition to these ways of understanding performance, we could, of course, which I mentioned above and which are very schematic, we can think of other variations like performance in the meaning of appearing, of being perceivable, being on display, or performance in the sense of maintaining one's vital functions or doing something to alter one's environment and so on, which plants also do. That makes performance an almost ubiquitous phenomenon. And therefore, to end, we can say with Karen Barad that we can speak of participating in the ongoing performance of the world. So that's sort of, well, something to start from.
I will start with a short introduction that this title, A Thought of Performance, was something that I began with in 2016, and it coincided with sort of phenomena, what's going on in performance philosophy, which was, well, it began from speculative materialism, the Warwick School in early 2000s, and then continued into something called non-standard philosophy or non-philosophy, and they translated at least maybe 10 books by a French, quite obscure philosopher called François Laruelle, who started the project called Non-Standard Thought or Non-Philosophy. So that was kind of my starting point in 2016 as I worked in that topic. And then I will go to the conclusions in a moment, but before I present the conclusion is that I work with this basically one sentence, or the two ideas. One is performance, and one is thinking, and trying to mix them with performance, and performing often with audio performance, with theremin, also quite obscure electronic instrument from 1919, and then with turntables, recording my own speech. So material and intangible performances. And then recently now, the kind of conclusion part is that while I've been writing a book which seems to be now called something fictioning, not a fiction, but a kind of fiction between author theory and narrative writing, I started to work with, or return into something that actually started my artistic practice in 1990s already, when I studied in Poland for 1 year in school in Poznan Art Academy, and one of my professors was quite well-known Polish conceptual artist Jarosław Kozłowski, who had run a studio there. And only recently now I got to understand that when we talk about conceptual art in the so-called former East countries, we don't talk about the same thing at all when we talk conceptual art in US or Europe. Well, Kozłowski made a book, like many of the artists in 70s made book art in 72 called Reality. And it's a very small artistic book where he took a one page from the Immanuel Kant, I think it was Judgment of Pure Reason. And he took the one page and he copied it in a way that only thing what was left what was the punctuations. So what I continued to do for the exhibition or for the final event was that I took all the presentations and all my published text, and I edited a book in homage to Jarosław Kozłowski, that it has only punctuation marks and no other information, except there's numbers, because they are footnote numbers. So basically what punctuation does is they are when the body appears, because it's a moment for breathing or sigh or something, a pause. So the title is kind of unpronounceable. And then the final work, because of the whole process of having this final event, took a year, and I had different ideas, and then I started working with something that I also goes very back. Because of Corona, I started sewing again. And I had actually the same sentence, the thought of performance. So we have here 3 words, thought of performance, but also a comma. And for me, quite a significant, often used in academic text, but also otherwise it's called the ellipsis. And for instance, there's a Chantal Akerman writes on her films that they are actually, like Jean Dillman, a film about a housewife in Brussels. She actually shows those things that often is put in brackets in other directors' projects. So ellipsis. But the idea is with these curtains, or as some people call them, flags, is that you can change the order as you wish. And in this space, what we are here now, we have noticed that it's often the wind that is performing. with these curtains, or whatever you call them. But that's the kind of one line I've been working with, and I continue as hopefully I will finish the book on called Performance Thinking at some point. And then, of course, there's another line that I've been continuing, which is working with ideas of finance and performance, and that's another project in the future as well. But thanks.
Ask me how to do things with performance, nor with artistic research. Don't ask me how to do things with performance, nor with artistic research. Only the woods and the sky's bright brilliance will fill my heart with ideas. Only the woods and the sky's bright brilliance will fill my heart with ideas. Artistic research repeat itself, and the world will barely notice. Artistic research made itself, and the world will barely notice. Performers always stand united and guarantee art matters. Performers always stand united and guarantee art matters.
So that was another conference performance from Plymouth.
The SAR conference, 2008.
Yes.
But after that, it's very hard to say something. It was a beautiful ending. This Longtable is meant for conversation, and now it would be lovely to have somebody who would have some concerns in the room when we've somehow shared our concerns. I don't know. Does Tanya have any concerns or then not? You're welcome. According to the rules, if you come to the table, you can speak.
I don't know if concern is always a negative thing. I just wanted to thank you for your work, actually, because it's like I have been following since the Karpa 2 years ago, and I think you're all doing incredibly important work, and I hope that more people could kind of find the path to grasp it. Maybe there's also one question, how to bring these projects more to people. Is that a concern that you have, or is it because of course you brought it to the world tour so there has been a lot of interaction, And how important is it for you to share it with maybe a bigger audience outside of the art world? Is that a concern, and how would you engage that?
That's actually something that I've been thinking about, because I'm responsible for editing the final book to which all of us have written. And all the texts are, I mean, it's an academic book, but we sort of try to write it in a way that it's approachable, even if you're not, only academic. And I realized when I was sort of trying to figure out how to convince a publisher to publish it, that all of us, the things that we'd written about discuss with other fields. And I think that if we think of, in terms of this project, like the artistic practice is one part of it, and that already performance art tends to sort of exist in these sort of intersections of fine art and music and theatre and dance, and it's sort of what is the name of the committee? Multi-art committee? Whatever. So it's sort of like in the intersections. So we have video art here, and photography, and textile art, and sound art, and that's all present. And in the same way, I think that all of the theories that we discuss, that all of our theoretical starting points are linked with other disciplines than art research or artistic research or performance studies. So I do think that this is something that all of us will continue, not together, but in other constellations, and maybe that takes it out to the world. That's sort of my take on it.
I could add that, because I think that's a good question. And I haven't thought about it, but sitting here in the Hietsu Pavilion, and when the rain came and there was this elder couple, and when they heard it was an art exhibition, they immediately went out. That was too scary. So it somehow, I realized that we've been more engaged in bridging art and academia, or trying to stretch the idea of how much of artistic means and artistic tools can be used in academia, or then trying to sort of help other artists not to be afraid of academic context. For instance, the text now in Taidelehti, which is related to this pavilion, that to somehow work with these different fields, besides the different disciplines, of course, dance history, performance philosophy, feminist pedagogy, or post-humanist research, and so on. There is a whole variety. But this idea of the sort of the man on the street has not been the main focus. But of course, for instance, the Maunola Library thing, that was a normal audience piece, so there was audience, or if I'm thinking of my work in Harakka, if somebody comes there, they, yeah. So it's, yeah, but it has not been a main focus, I think. Or what do you think?
Well, as you said, yeah, but it's a. But how do you see it? Do you think that this could offer something for a wider public as well?
I hope so, because otherwise,
Yeah.
I think art generally should have that potential.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it because you sung that the world will hardly notice, and I wish often that the world would notice more. So it definitely has the potential, but I understand that you can't focus on everything. I don't know if Tero, you still wanted to add to this. I have another question or concern.
Well, I can continue. I think I'm not so concerned about that. I think it's actually I find it extremely problematic concept of like what you use to term the man of the street. I think it's a massive problem. But I think for me, what during these 4 years and during these experiences, I might sound slightly scathing now, but I think my main concern is artistic research instead of artistic research itself. Like if we see that we do settings like this, but we don't notice here community. We don't, maybe they're there, I doubt it, and it is that is something that I mentioned the experience of when I was studying, but that's been often in Finnish art scene quite the same. But my experience of being in Poland and noticing is that when artists themselves are interested of other artists' works and they go there in masses, they also invite so-called local guys because they're interested in what's happening. But then if there's not even this kind of it's kind of academic critical mass would be really necessary unless it's happened like what Hanna just sang. Nobody barely noticed, and I think it's fair to say that because it's really for me it's a serious issue. Not for this that of course there are many research that is only for a very small audience and it should be like that. But art is a public event. It's a public activity. And it needs this kind of mass that becomes a momentum. If it doesn't have it, then people start doing something else. That's my answer.
That's a good point, because if I think back, especially on performance art scene in Finland, because strangely enough, Finland has been a country where performance art, like in a traditional sense, has been very strong. For good and bad. So that performance art scene has been at times very close but very active. So performance artists would go and watch each other's performances and they would perform for each other. Like some poetry circles are like that you go and listen to other poets and that's it. But that also becomes like in the same way as in an academic discipline. You listen to your colleagues because you want to critique them, you want to engage in a debate and so on. And it's not for everybody, it's for a specialized audience. And of course this has been criticized a lot and it's elitistic and the artists talk about among themselves only. But the counter situation is exactly what Tero described, that if everybody sort of only wants to reach the big audience and wants to sort of find the people on the beach instead of sort of being interested in each other's work, then there is no collegiality and then there is no critical mass that produces critical thinking, and so this is a hard balance. We need specialized circles who devote themselves to some topics, and we need also things that are open for many people, but you cannot be everything for everybody all the time.
I think that in terms of the lyrics, it was sort of, when we were writing them, we were sort of taking the piss at the conference topic in Plymouth, which was artistic research will eat itself, which is sort of this idea of the Ouroboros that just keeps eating its own tail. And we sort of wanted to say that maybe, you know, like the artistic research has become this sort of Ouroboros that eats itself instead of engaging with art more broadly or audiences outside of, both inside of academia but also outside of the sort of academic circles. And then the last verse is of course about being a performer, that since we're all performers we should take a united front to make sure that art still matters. And that was sort of the point of the song as well. Well, actually, the point of the song was that the very last verse was sung by kiwi birds, but the kiwi birds are not here. I forgot to ask Pilvi to bring the kiwi birds.
Next time you will sing with kiwi birds again, I promise.
Yes, but it was a deliberate provocation, because there is, like, as someone who teaches in the doctoral program for artistic research at the Theatre Academy, it is a concern that you know, whether whether colleagues from outside of the department or the departments where artistic research is taught come to see performances or practices or rehearsals or projects that are done by our doctoral candidates or our faculty members. So is it becoming so insular, and where does that come from? And I think that Pilvi's work on institutions, for example, Tero's work with performance philosophy, sort of addressed this question as well. This that you need to be active, but it's not up to you as an individual. That we should really think about ways of doing things collegially. And I think that there is, based on what our doctoral candidates are interested in, there is a great deal of interest in doing that, in doing both the sort of let's talk amongst ourselves and then opening it up to various directions.
If I continue, it's just quote for a few MS students. Yesterday talking with one labs MS student, Suvi Tuominen, and it's a kind of Haraway may say staying with the trouble, but it's mostly that artists are staying with the mess, and often if institution becomes a kind of cookie cutter, this Dasha Che uses the term that in terms of ethics, that the ethical guidelines become cookie cutters, but actually it would be more beneficial for us to stay with the mess a little bit longer, in a way that manage this thing, and that in a way, there was an example we discussed about, I don't know, we talk about, for instance, Finnish grant system. What if the grant system would be like this? Because now it's 8 or 9% who will receive the grant from, but what if all those people who applied would be able to read everybody else's application? What if we would know all those projects and ideas that are bubbling under, but we don't know them? And we would actually be ready to share what we know in a way that would be quite of a mess, but actually that would benefit in the sense that we would know that some guy or people in Riihimäki are thinking the same questions that in Kontula. And then, but that's quite a massive step. And I think, but institutions could help in this, that we are kind of openly, we are in a mess and we will continue being in a mess. And that, because that's so common for artists. Artists are, I think what artists are supreme is that they can maintain a mess and they can live with that. Most other occupations don't deal with that so well, but artists can. And I think that's what we should be proud of, that we are a mess.
Mess or not mess, but yeah.
Well,
mess is a beautiful word. Trouble. But
she has another question.
All right.
But it suits the
No,
topic
I think later. Go ahead. I come back to that.
It suits the topic actually quite well, because you have been staying with each other's mess for 4 or almost 5 years, and I was thinking that how many artists have that luxury, if you can see it as that. Of course it's stressful and everything, all those things as well, but it's also a luxury to have this kind of dense group who is concerned with similar questions, even if it's from different angles. How did you experience that, and how do you take from that into your individual work? And also maybe for staying with the mess, maybe there is also an option or a potential to encourage other people to have this kind of mess group.
I'm happy to begin with that. Now, I apologize because I always say this, but, so you've heard it, but just for Tanya. So one thing that is, how should I say, one nice thing with academia is that people are supposed to collaborate. In many forms of art, collaboration is not a given. Artists compete with each other unless they're doing a project where somebody is they're sort of in the same project. But in research, you cannot do research alone. You have to. You can make art and say, I don't know what other artists do, even if it's like sort of stupid. But in research, you have to somehow collaborate. But I think the point with staying with the trouble in this case, or allowing the mess, is to focus on differentiation rather than consensus. And this is a theoretical concept also. I take it from Barad, you could take it from heterogenesis, from Guattari if you want, but you can take it from different. But what easily happens is that when people work together, they try to somehow find the common denominator and try to make everybody to fit in this one formula, this one topic, this one aim, this one goal. And that's of course beautiful. But that is, for most people, and especially artists who tend to be sort of like this, it's not the best policy. So this idea of encouraging differentiation, because if you encourage, this is my 80s philosophy, if you encourage people to what is called
consensus?
No, but keskipako, keskihaku is the two forces. Centrifugal. If you try to push people to centrifugal, they start to spread out, and if you sort of encourage centripetal function, then they start to collaborate. This works very well with students also. Okay, now I sidetracked a little bit, but this idea that the sort of protecting not only the freedom of art, but protecting academic freedom. There is the idea that you should be able to follow your curiosity. This is perverse. It sounds perverse from artists already because they need to have commission. You should be allowed to research whatever your curiosity drives you to, without if it's useful or not. Because that way in artistic researches, this is still not really considered. We're supposed to be useful. Okay, somebody else.
I can add, I mean, it's not also if you think for others, well, one thing is we need to fight against ageism in a way that we need to be like some horrible thoughts that can 50 or people over 50 years old do performance art anymore. In a way that kind of these thoughts that it really exist here, and also this thing that you have to also think. If I would think other people starting a project, then it's not a good idea to look for only common denominators. You need to look for discrepancies. You need to look for, even in like you might feel like I don't know if I want to work with that person, but that person has very interesting concepts and ideas. I think it's more beneficial to do that than take it, because it's not life commitment. This is not marriage. It's not like it's not the mess that I have in a kitchen. That's a different mess. But it's more like, it's the term what they use, the mess hall. That it's a place for people to converge and meet. But it's and what we talked a few nights ago. It's one thing is of course that you need to keep some joy, even though things are grim sometimes. But you need to keep up joy of mess. I like mess more than problem and trouble, because troubles are like something you solve.
Yeah, and it's a different thing. Mess is mess, but of course, yes.
I think it has been a great privilege to work in this kind of project, and no question about it. And I don't know if there will be anything like this for me. I mean that this whole, it's true.
We are a mess.
Yeah, but I don't think it's normal to work in this kind of project.
No, not even in academia.
And this kind of mess, and it's not about. Of course, we all have different kind of experiences, and we have other works as well, and other life as well, and so on, and not, of course, not has been easy and so on, but I think there has been a great value in this, and still is.
Yeah, and I think that is also the lack of desire for consensus is something that is made this project unique also in academic terms, because in academic research increasingly it's projects, it's not individuals competing against each other so much, it is that too, but it's more projects and universities competing against each other, and that's capitalism for you. And that leads into these like well-known issues with the publish or perish culture, or impact. Yes, impact. Look at what you can do when you're not trying. but it's also this idea that when you do a research project, that you should all arrive at a conclusion, or that you have a hypothesis, and then you work on that hypothesis together, and then you together arrive at some sort of publications and solutions. And I think that that's ridiculous, because that actually limits the potential in bringing people together, even around academic questions about.
But it depends on
politics.
the topic. I mean, the concept of performance, we spoke about it. The concept of performance you can't solve it. This is performance. The concept of performance is already so broad. So the only way to approach is to look from very different angles. So of course, sometimes if you want to solve to create a vaccine for COVID, it's a different type of collaboration.
Yes,
but even there, blue skies research might be good. Even there.
Yeah, I was talking about humanities in terms of my one of my disciplines is history, and in history, the way that projects tend to be built, they have some sort of a common goal. And then you bring in people who can work on different angles towards that specific goal. And so it's very sort of oriented towards, arriving at a joint conclusion of some kind and joint publication, instead of, having, 4 different kinds of philosophies of understandings of history. There are a lot of different kinds of philosophies of history as well. So different understandings of what history is or can be. And if you would bring those together, you would get a very different kind of project than...
And very much more interesting.
Yeah, well...
To have different... I think as a reader, I would love to read a book with 4 different views on the philosophy of history, rather than to have 4 different books which all try to imagine that they have the only view in the world. Okay, but that's... I think if we would... although we have very different views, I think still that if we would find it important, we could formulate some thoughts that we could share to some extent. Yes, probably. Some, not all of them, but it's not that it's the differentiation doesn't mean that it's everything. I mean, differentiation is. Differentiation. Well, is this about the time when my brain is differentiating too much?
Yeah.
I would say thank you. This is the end. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.